The music
From
filled the
humble
palace.
shepherd to
David's
mighty
heart,
king,
gentle and
David
soothing.
rose by God's
King
hand,
Saul
his
reclined on
enemies
his
scattered
throne,
before him.
eyes closed, tension slowly draining from his face. David had become the court musician, the giant slayer, now trusted to calm the king's troubled spirit. But something was shifting. Saul's moods grew darker, more volatile, unpredictable. The evil spirit that tormented him wasn't responding to music anymore. It was feeding on jealousy. David played, eyes down, fingers moving across strings. He didn't see it coming. Saul's hand moved to the spear leaning against his throne. His eyes opened, dark, wild, filled with sudden rage. In one violent motion, Saul hurled the spear. It whistled through the air, aimed directly at David's chest. David saw it at the last second, dove sideways. The spear slammed into the wall behind him, vibrating from impact. The music stopped. Silence crashed down. David looked up from the floor, heart pounding, eyes wide. Saul stood, chest heaving, staring at the spear. Then at David. Something had snapped. The king who'd honored David after Goliath now wanted him dead. David scrambled to his feet, back toward the door. Saul didn't apologize, didn't explain, just watched him with cold, calculating eyes. David fled the throne room. The palace, once a place of honor, had become a death trap, and he had no idea why. 1 Samuel 18:10-11. Jonathan found David in a courtyard, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. "He tried to kill me," David breathed. "Your father threw a spear at me." Jonathan's face went pale. "What? I don't understand. What did I do?" Jonathan placed a hand on David's shoulder. "This isn't about you, it's about him." Jonathan knew his father better than anyone, knew the darkness that consumed him, the paranoia, the jealousy that had been growing since David killed Goliath. "The people sing about you," Jonathan said quietly. "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. He hears it, and it's eating him alive." David's eyes widened. "I never asked for that. I know," Jonathan interrupted, "but it doesn't matter. You're a threat now, whether you mean to be or
Hurry!
not."
They're coming!
Jonathan
I'm down.
looked at his
Let's
friend,
go.
the man
This
who should
way,
have
to
been
the
his
gate.
rival,
Stay close.
who'd accomplished more than Jonathan
Hurry!
ever had,
They're coming!
who the people
down.
loved
Let's
more
go.
than they loved Saul's
This way,
own
to the
son.
gate!
Stay close.
And Jonathan felt nothing but love. "I'm on your side," Jonathan said firmly, "even if it costs me the throne, even if it costs me everything. You're my brother, and I'll protect you." They made a covenant that day, a bond deeper than blood. Jonathan, the rightful heir, choosing loyalty to David over his own crown. It was friendship that would be tested repeatedly, friendship that would cost Jonathan everything. But in that moment, it was unshakable, and David needed it. Because Saul's hatred wasn't going away, it was just beginning. 1 Samuel 18:1-4, 20:12-17. Michal, Saul's daughter and David's wife, shook him awake in the middle of the night. "David, get up! My father's sending men to kill you. If you don't leave tonight, you'll be dead by morning." David sat up, groggy, confused. "What? There's no time. Go, now." She led him to a window at the back of the house. Below, the street was dark and empty. But not for long. "They're coming," Michal whispered urgently. "You have to climb down." David looked at her. "Come with me." "I can't. If I disappear, they'll search harder. I'll buy you time." She kissed him quickly. "Go." David climbed through the window, lowered himself
You
down,
are safe here
dropped
in
to the
Rama.
ground. He looked back
Thank
up
you.
once.
I was
Michal
so
was already
afraid.
gone.
Rest
He
now.
ran through dark streets, past sleeping houses toward the city gate. Behind him, he heard it, footsteps. Shouting, soldiers. Michal had taken an idol. Seth placed it in David's bed, covered it with garments and goat's hair to look like he was sleeping. When the soldiers burst in, she played innocent. "He's sick. He can't be moved." They believed her, at first. By the time they discovered the deception and reported back to Saul, David was gone, disappeared into the night, a fugitive now. No longer the hero, no longer the honored giant slayer, just a man running for his life, from a king who should have been his father-in-law, from a palace that should have been home, into a wilderness with no clear destination, just survival. 1 Samuel 19:11-17. David ran to Ramah, to the prophet Samuel. If anyone could help, if anyone could make sense of this nightmare, it was the man who'd anointed him. Samuel opened his door and saw David, wild-eyed, breathless, desperate. "Come in," Samuel said gently. David collapsed inside, telling everything. The spear, the soldiers, the escape. "Why does he want me dead? What did I do?" Samuel listened, face grave.
I hunger, my
"You did
lord.
nothing wrong,
Take
but
and
you're
be filled."
anointed, and Saul knows it. They stayed together, David finding refuge in the prophet's presence. But word reached Saul. David is in Ramah with Samuel. Saul sent soldiers immediately, but when they arrived and saw Samuel leading a company of prophets in worship, something supernatural happened. The Spirit of God came upon the soldiers. They began prophesying, praising God. Unable to complete their mission, Saul sent more soldiers. Same result. Then a third group. Same thing. Finally, Saul went himself, furious, determined. But as he approached Ramah, the Spirit of God came upon him too. Saul stripped off his royal robes and prophesied before Samuel. Lay there all day and all night, unable to move, unable to harm David. It was protection, divine, undeniable, but also temporary. When it lifted, Saul's hatred would return. David knew it. So while Saul lay prophesying, David slipped away. Again, always running, always looking over his shoulder. The wilderness was becoming his home, and the crown felt further away than ever. 1 Samuel 19:18-24. Days turned into weeks of running. David was exhausted, hungry, desperate. He arrived at Nob where the priest served. Ahimelech the priest greeted him nervously. "David, why are you alone? Where are your men?" David lied. "The king sent me on a secret mission. My men are meeting me elsewhere." Ahimelech looked uncertain but nodded. "What do you need?" "Food, anything you have." "There's only consecrated bread, the bread set aside for priests. You can have it if your men are ceremonially clean." David hesitated. This bread wasn't meant for him. It was holy, reserved, but his stomach cramped with hunger. His body was failing. Survival demanded compromise. "We're clean," David said. Ahimelech gave him the bread. David ate. It sustained him, kept him alive. But something felt wrong. He was breaking protocol, crossing lines, not out of disrespect, out of desperation. "Do you have a weapon?" David asked. "I left in such a hurry," Ahimelech thought. "Only the sword of Goliath, the one you took from him. It's wrapped in cloth behind the ephod." David's eyes widened. Goliath's sword, the weapon of the giant he'd killed, now his only defense. "There's none like it," David said. "Give it to me." He left Nob with bread and a giant's sword. Sustained but not satisfied. Surviving but not thriving. The anointing on his head seemed meaningless now. He was supposed to be king. Instead, he was a fugitive eating holy bread and wielding a dead enemy's weapon. Nothing made sense, but he kept moving, because stopping meant dying. 1 Samuel 21, 1-9. Desperation drove David to the unthinkable. He fled to Gath, Goliath's hometown. Enemy territory, the place where he should have been killed on sight. But David thought he could hide there, thought maybe anonymity would protect him. He was wrong. Isn't this David, the king of the land? Isn't this the one they sing about? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands? The servants of Achish, king of Gath, recognized him immediately. Panic seized David. He was surrounded by Philistines, Goliath's people, and they knew exactly who he was. David looked around, guards closing in, eyes hostile, hands on weapons. He had seconds to decide. Fight, he'd lose. Run, where? So he did something bizarre, something humiliating. He pretended to be insane. David let spit run down his beard, scratched marks on the gates, made strange sounds, acted like a madman. The guard stepped back, disgusted. Achish looked at him with contempt. "Do I lack madmen, that you bring this fellow here to carry on like this in front of me? Must this man come into my house?" They threw him out, mocked him, dismissed him as harmless, and David stumbled away, humiliated but alive. He'd killed a giant with a stone. Now he was drooling on himself to survive. The fall from hero to fool was complete. But survival demanded it. Pride couldn't live in the wilderness. Only the desperate survived. And David was learning. Glory fades fast. Anointing doesn't guarantee comfort. Sometimes God's chosen are forced to play the fool just to see tomorrow. 1 Samuel 21-15. David fled to the cave of Adullam, dark, hidden, empty. He collapsed inside, alone, wondering how his life had come to this. But word spread. David is at Adullam. And people came. Not the strong, not the successful, not the put together. The broken came. Men in distress, crushed by debt, running from creditors. Men in debt, owing more than they could pay. Men who were discontented, bitter, angry, forgotten by society. 400 men gathered around David in that cave, outcasts, misfits, the rejected. They looked at him, the giant slayer now living in a cave, the anointed king hiding like a criminal, and they saw themselves. "We have nowhere else to go," one said. David looked at them. These weren't warriors. They were desperate men, broken men, but they were his. Then we stand together, David said. It wasn't a royal decree. It was a bond. These men had nothing, but they had each other. And they had a leader who understood rejection, who knew what it meant to be forgotten, to be hunted, to have nowhere to belong. David began to organize them, train them, not into soldiers, into brothers. In that cave, something was forming. Not a rebellion, a family, not an army, a kingdom. These men would become David's mighty warriors, the core of his future reign. But right now, they were just broken people finding purpose in a dark cave, following a king with no throne, believing in a promise that seemed impossible. Yet somehow, together, they were stronger than they'd ever been alone. 1 Samuel 22:2. David and his men were hiding deep in the cave of En-Gedi when scouts came running. Saul is coming, 3,000 soldiers. David's heart raced. They were trapped. The cave had only one entrance. If Saul's army found them, they'd be slaughtered. Further back, David whispered. Everyone, deeper into the cave. Silence. 400 men pressed into the darkness. Not a sound, not a breath. Then, footsteps at the entrance. David peered out from the shadows and froze. It was Saul, alone. The king had entered the cave to relieve himself, had no idea David and his men were hidden just feet away. David's men saw the opportunity immediately. One whispered urgently, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said, 'I will give your enemy into your hands.'" Another, "Do it now. End this." David's hand moved to his sword. One strike, that's all it would take. One thrust, and the years of running would be over. Saul, unaware, vulnerable, within reach. David crept forward, silent as shadow. His men watched, breathless. David raised his knife, moved behind Saul, and instead of killing him, cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Quietly, carefully. Then retreated back into darkness. When Saul left the cave, David's men stared at him in disbelief. "Why?" "He's the Lord's anointed," David said, voice shaking. "I won't raise my hand against him." Even his conscience bothered him for cutting the robe, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about honor. 1 Samuel 24:1-7. Saul emerged from the cave, began walking away. David's men watched in stunned silence. Their leader had just let the enemy escape. Let the man hunting him live. It made no sense. But David couldn't live with silence. He stepped to the cave entrance. "My lord the king," Saul spun around, hand on sword. David bowed low, face to the ground. "Why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lift my hand against my master, because he is the Lord's anointed." David held up the corner of robe. "See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. See that there is nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life." Saul stared at the fabric. Recognition dawned. Horror, shame. "Is that your voice, David, my son?" Saul's voice broke. He began to weep. "You are more righteous than I. You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly." The valley echoed with Saul's sobs. His army stood frozen, watching their king break. "I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands." It was confession, acknowledgement, surrender, but David didn't trust it, couldn't. Saul's emotions were unstable, his promises temporary. So David stayed at a distance, and when Saul left, David retreated into hiding. The chase would continue. 1 Samuel 24:8-22. The peace didn't last. Weeks later, Saul was hunting David again, as if the cave moment never happened, as if the tears and confession were just another mood swing. David's faith wavered. Will I always be running? Will this ever end? One day, scouts brought news. Nabal, a wealthy man in Maon, is shearing his sheep. He has thousands. David and his men had been protecting Nabal's shepherds for months, kept bandits away, ensured safety. David sent messengers. "Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them." It was a reasonable request, custom even. But Nabal sneered. "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and give them to men coming from who knows where?" The messengers returned with the insult. David's face darkened. "Every man strap on his sword." 400 men armed themselves, ready for blood, ready to wipe out Nabal and every male in his household. But someone warned Abigail, Nabal's wife. She was wise, quick, understood the danger. She loaded donkeys with food, bread, wine, sheep, grain, rode out to meet David before violence erupted. When she saw him, she dismounted, bowed low. "My lord, let the blame be on me alone. Please don't pay attention to that wicked man Nabal. May the Lord keep you from bloodshed." Her words cut through David's rage. "Praise be to the God who sent you today to meet me," David said, exhaling. "If you hadn't come, not one male would have been left alive by morning." Crisis averted, by wisdom, by a woman who saw beyond her husband's foolishness. 1 Samuel 20:35. Months passed. David and his men camped in the wilderness of Ziph. Word reached them, "Saul is searching for you." Again. David sent scouts. They confirmed it. Saul has camped with 3,000 men. David's frustration boiled over. How many times would this happen? How long would he run? That night, David did something bold. "Who will go down with me to Saul's camp?" Abishai, his nephew, stepped forward. "I will." They crept through the darkness, past sentries, past soldiers, into the very heart of Saul's camp, and found him, sleeping, his spear stuck in the ground beside his head, his water jug nearby. Abner, his commander, slept beside him. The entire camp was in deep sleep, a supernatural sleep sent by God. Abishai whispered urgently, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice." It would be so easy. One strike, one moment, and all of this would end. David's hand hovered over the spear, but he couldn't. Don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? Abishai looked at him like he was crazy. "Take the spear and water jug," David said. "Let's go." They took Saul's weapons, his water, proof that they'd been there, proof that mercy was a choice, not weakness. Then they slipped away into the night, and once again, David chose honor over opportunity, restraint over revenge, the long way over the shortcut, because the throne God gives is better than the throne you take. 1 Samuel 26:6-12. David climbed to the top of a hill, put distance between himself and Saul's camp, then shouted across the valley, "Abner, answer me!" Abner woke with a start, looked around, realized someone was calling from a distance. "Who are you who calls to the king? You're a man, aren't you?" David's voice echoed, "Why didn't you guard your lord the king? Someone came to destroy your lord. You deserve to die. Look around. Where are the king's spear and water jug?" Abner's blood ran cold, scrambled to check. The spear gone, the water jug gone. Someone had been in their camp, inches from the king, and no one noticed. Saul woke, heard David's voice, recognized it. "Is that your voice, David, my son?" "Yes, it is, my lord the king. Why is my lord pursuing his servant? What have I done, and what wrong am I guilty of?" The same question. Again, still no answer. "I have sinned," Saul called back. "Come back, David, my son. I will not try to harm you again. You have valued my life today. I have been a fool." David held up the spear, the water jug. "Here is the king's spear. Let one of your young men come and get it. You tried to kill me. God delivered you into my hands, but I wouldn't harm you. May the Lord reward me for my righteousness and faithfulness." Saul wept. Again, "May you be blessed, David, my son. You will do great things and surely triumph." But David didn't return, didn't trust the tears anymore. He turned and walked away, into the wilderness, into the waiting, into more years of delay. 1 Samuel 26:13-25. David was exhausted, emotionally, physically, spiritually. "One of these days I will be destroyed by Saul," he thought. "The best thing I can do is escape to the land of the Philistines." It was a desperate decision, dangerous, but Saul wouldn't chase him into enemy territory, right? David took his 600 men, their families, possessions, everything, and went to Achish, king of Gath. The same king he'd once fooled by, pretending insanity. But this time, Achish welcomed him. "Stay with me. I'll give you a town." Achish gave David Ziklag, a small city on the border. David and his men settled there. Finally, rest. Finally, safety. When Saul heard David had fled to Philistine territory, he stopped pursuing him. The hunting stopped, but the cost was high. David was now living among Israel's enemies, walking a tightrope, pretending loyalty to Achish while raiding Israel's actual enemies, Geshurites, Girzites, Amalekites. He'd attack these groups, take plunder, tell Achish he'd raided Israelite towns. Achish believed him, thought David had become so hated by Israel that he'd never be able to return. "He will be my servant forever," Achish thought. But David was lying, playing both sides, surviving through deception. It worked for a while, but living among enemies, even false peace, takes a toll. David wrote psalms during this time, dark ones. How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? He was safe, but he wasn't home. He was protected, but not by God's design. He was surviving, but not thriving, and the compromise was eating at him. 1 Samuel 27:12. War came. The Philistines gathered their forces to fight Israel. Achish summoned David. You and your men will accompany me in the battle. David's stomach dropped. He'd been dreading this moment, praying it wouldn't come. Fight against Israel, against his own people, against Saul? But refuse, and Achish would know the truth. No, David had been lying, would kill him and his men. David had no good options. Very well, David said carefully. Then you will see for yourself what your servant can do. It was a non-answer, vague enough to sound like agreement. Achish smiled. Good. I will make you my bodyguard for life. The Philistine army assembled, thousands of soldiers, chariots, weapons. They marched toward Israel. David marched with them, heart heavy, mind racing. God, what do I do? But as the armies gathered at Aphek, the Philistine commanders noticed David and his men. What about these Hebrews? Achish defended him. This is David, who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel. He's been with me for over a year, and I've found no fault in him. But the commanders were furious. Send him back. He must not go with us into battle. He'll turn against us. How better to regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? They pressured Achish. Finally, reluctantly, Achish called David. You've been reliable, but the commanders don't trust you. Leave in the morning. David pretended to be offended. But inside, relief flooded him. God had provided a way out. Without David lifting a finger, without compromise, without betrayal. The impossible dilemma solved by God's sovereignty. 1 Samuel 29:11. David and his men marched back toward Ziklag. It took 3 days. As they approached the city, something felt wrong. Smoke. The smell hit them first, thick, acrid. Then they saw it. Ziklag was burning. David ran. His men ran. They reached the city and found devastation. Homes destroyed, walls torn down, everything burned, and worse. Their families gone, wives, children, everyone taken. The Amalekites had raided while they were away. David fell to his knees. His 2 wives, Ahinoam and Abigail, were among the captured. His men collapsed around him, weeping, wailing. Grief poured out until they had no strength left. Then the grief turned to anger. This is your fault, David. You led us away. Our families are gone because of you. They picked up stones, talked openly about killing him. David was in danger from his own men. Everything was falling apart. His city destroyed, his family captured, his men turning on him. Years of that running, years of waiting, years of trusting God, and for what? To lose everything. David sat in the rubble, alone, abandoned, surrounded by men ready to stone him. This was his lowest moment, his darkest hour, his breaking point. But the Bible says something remarkable. David found strength in the Lord his God, not in his circumstances, not in his men, not in logic or hope or solutions, in the Lord. He called for Abiathar, the priest. Bring me the ephod, and David prayed. Not a polite prayer, a desperate one. Should I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? God answered, pursue them. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. 1 Samuel 30:1-8. David stood, wiped his face, looked at his men, broken, angry, grieving.
A war
Going
without
after
a
them.
side.
Some looked at him like he was insane. We're exhausted. We have nothing left. It's hopeless. But David's voice was firm. God said we'll recover everything. Let's move. They gathered weapons, what little they had. 600 men set out, but after crossing the Besor Valley, 200 were too exhausted to continue. We'll guard the supplies, they said. David didn't argue. He took the remaining 400 and pressed on. They found an Egyptian in a field, abandoned, starving. David gave him food, water, revived him. Who are you? I'm an Egyptian, slave to an Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided Ziklag and burned it. Can you lead us to them? The man hesitated. Swear to me by God that you won't kill me or hand me back to my master, and I'll take you. He led them. At dusk, they found the Amalekites, spread out across the countryside, eating, drinking, celebrating their plunder, oblivious. David and his men attacked at twilight, fought until the next evening. 400 young Amalekites escaped on camels, the rest destroyed. David recovered everything, his wives, his men's families, all the plunder, the sheep, the cattle, everything the Amalekites had taken, and more. They returned to the 200 men who'd stayed behind. Some of David's men grumbled. They didn't fight. They don't deserve a share. But David said, no, the share of the man who stayed with the supplies is to be the same as the man who went to battle. All will share alike. It became law in Israel, and in the victory, David's leadership solidified, not through strength, through faithfulness. 1 Samuel 30, 9-25. While David was recovering his family, battle raged on Mount Gilboa. Israel faced the Philistines. The fighting was fierce. The Philistines pressed hard against Saul and his sons. Jonathan fought bravely. So did Abinadab and Malchishua, Saul's other sons. But the Philistines were overwhelming. One by one, Saul's sons fell. Jonathan, David's closest friend, his covenant brother,
Everything
was
burned
killed in
now!
battle.
You serve me!
Saul saw his sons die, saw his army collapsing. The archers found him. Arrows pierced his armor, wounded him critically. Draw your sword and run me through, Saul told his armor-bearer. Otherwise, these uncircumcised men will abuse me. But the armor-bearer was terrified, refused. So Saul took his own sword, fell on it, died. His armor-bearer, seeing Saul dead, did the same. Israel's first king, dead by his own hand. The next day, Philistines came to strip the dead, found Saul and his 3 sons, cut off Saul's head, stripped his armor, hung his body on the wall of Beth-shan. A man from the battlefield reached David days later. He came with torn clothes, dust on his head, fell before David. Where have you come from? I've escaped from the Israelite camp. What happened? The man's voice shook. The men fled from the battle. Many fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead. David's world stopped. Jonathan, dead? The man continued, describing the battle. But David barely heard. His enemy was dead. His friend was dead. One brought freedom, one brought devastation, and David's heart shattered. 1 Samuel 31, 1-13, 2 Samuel 1, 1-4. David didn't celebrate, didn't rejoice, didn't say, finally my enemy is gone. He tore his clothes, wept, mourned. His men did the same. They fasted until evening. For Saul, for Jonathan, for the army of Israel, for all who'd fallen. The messenger who brought the news expected reward, expected David to celebrate Saul's death. But David looked at him with grief and fury. How were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? David called one of his men. Strike him down. The man was executed. David's honor wouldn't allow him to reward someone who claimed to have killed Saul, even if that death brought David closer to the throne. Then David composed a lament, a song of grief. Your glory, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen. Saul and Jonathan, in life they were loved and admired, and in death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep for Saul. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. It was raw, honest, beautiful, heartbreaking. David had lost his best friend, the one who'd protected him, chosen him over a throne, loved him unconditionally, and now Jonathan was gone. The path to the throne was open, but the cost was unbearable. David would become king, but he'd do it mourning, grieving. Remembering that power often comes wrapped in loss. 2 Samuel 1 then, David inquired of the Lord, should I go up to one of the towns of Judah? Go up. Where should I go? To Hebron. So David moved to Hebron with his 2 wives and all his men. Their families settled in the towns around Hebron. And the men of Judah came, anointed David king over the tribe of Judah. It was happening, finally, but only partially. David was king, but only over one tribe. The rest of Israel followed Ishbosheth, Saul's surviving son, made king by Abner, Saul's commander. The kingdom was divided, tension simmered. David ruled in Hebron for 7 years. It wasn't the full throne, wasn't complete, but it was a beginning. During those years, David's family grew, sons were born, his kingdom strengthened, but the conflict with Ishbosheth's house continued. Battles, skirmishes, political tension. David remained patient, didn't force his way to full power, didn't attack Ishbosheth, didn't manipulate or scheme. He waited, let God orchestrate, let time do what force couldn't. Slowly,
Recover everything!
Abner defected, then was killed by David's commander Joab against David's wishes. Ishbosheth was assassinated by his own men, again against David's orders. David executed the assassins, refused to celebrate violence even when it benefited him. One by one, the obstacles removed themselves, not by David's hand. And finally, after years of waiting, running, hiding, fighting, surviving, the elders of all Israel came to David at Hebron. "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king, you led Israel's forces, and the Lord said to you, 'You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler.'" They anointed David king over all Israel. 2 Samuel 2, 1-4, 5, 1-5. David stood in Hebron, newly crowned king over all Israel, 30 years old. After 15 years of waiting since Samuel's anointing, the promise was fulfilled. But he didn't gloat, didn't boast, didn't say, "I told you so." He just accepted the mantle. Soberly, gratefully. His first act as king? Capture Jerusalem. Make it the capital. Unite the nation under one city, one throne, one vision. He led his men against the Jebusite stronghold. They mocked him.
I
"You'll
mourn
never
the
get
enemy
in here."
we have lost.
But David found
But
a
he
way.
was our foe.
Through the water
Even in
shaft.
victory, we must honor the
Strategic,
fallen.
bold. Jerusalem fell, and David established it as the city of David, the center of his kingdom. He brought the Ark of the Covenant there, made worship, built a palace, established order, and his kingdom grew stronger. The Lord Almighty was with him. That was the key. Not David's strength, not his strategy, not his charisma, God's presence. David never forgot the wilderness years, never forgot the cave, the running, the fear, the moments he almost died. He wrote about them. "I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand." From shepherd to fugitive to king, from forgotten son to Israel's greatest ruler. Not because he was perfect, he wasn't. Not because he never failed, he did. But because he trusted God, honored God, waited on God, even when it cost him everything, even when the throne seemed impossible, even when mercy seemed foolish. And God honored that faith, lifted him, established him, made his name great. The boy anointed in secret became the king crowned in public. And his story proved God's timing is always perfect. Even when
Receive
it's
this
painful.
crown, a symbol
2
of your
Samuel
journey
5,
from
6-10,
fugitive to king.
Psalm
I accept it
41-2.
with humility.